The year is 1473 before the Common Era. You are standing barefoot on limestone already scorching in the dawn heat. Hands bound so tight behind your back, the rope has disappeared into swollen flesh. And around your neck hangs a wooden placard painted with hieroglyphics that spelled the word for cosmic betrayer. The judges have finished speaking. The sentence has been pronounced, and what is about to happen to you is not punishment. It is purification through systematic destruction of the body that dared to disrupt the order holding the universe together. Your name is Hanutmir. You are 22 years old, mother to 3 children who were taken from your home 2 days ago and told you died of fever. As far as Egyptian law is concerned, you did die. The moment the accusation was proven, you ceased to be a person with rights or identity. You became a vessel for demonstration, a living lesson carved in flesh about what happens when women forget that their bodies belong not to themselves but to their husbands, their families, and ultimately to Pharaoh himself. Before we descend into this darkness together, I need you to know something. I'm genuinely amazed that you're here watching this story unfold from wherever you are in the world. Drop a comment below telling me your location, because it's incredible how curiosity about these buried truths connects us across continents and centuries. Let me take you to the west bank of the Nile, near Thebes, where dawn light bleeds across desert sand, the color of old blood. Hanutmir stands in the Judgment Square outside the Temple of Karnak, surrounded by witnesses who have gathered not out of cruelty but out of obligation. Egyptian theology required public witness to adultery punishments because these were not private matters between spouses. They were cosmic corrections, restorations of Ma'at, the divine order that prevented reality from collapsing into chaos. A woman's adultery, in Egyptian legal philosophy, did not merely betray her husband. It polluted bloodlines that connected pharaohs to gods. It introduced uncertainty into lineages that anchored the living world to the eternal. It threatened the universe itself. 3 judges sit in shade beneath a reed canopy, faces hidden behind ceremonial masks depicting Anubis, the jackal-headed god who weighs hearts against feathers in the afterlife. They have already pronounced their verdict based on testimony from 2 male witnesses Hanutmir's, brother-in-law Amenhotep, and a slave he brought forward. The evidence, a pottery shard with a love poem scratched into its surface, allegedly found hidden in her clothing chest. Testimony that she had met secretly with a potter named Nakht on specific dates and times. The slave's confession that he had carried messages between them. Every word was fabricated. Amenhotep had propositioned Hanutmir repeatedly over 2 years and been rejected each time. The meetings described had never occurred. The slave had been beaten until he provided whatever testimony his master demanded. The love poem was copied by Amenhotep himself from verses he'd heard at a banquet. But under Egyptian law, none of this mattered. Physical evidence plus testimony from 2 male witnesses was sufficient for conviction regardless of truth. Hanutmir was not permitted to testify in her own defense. Her husband Jehuti tried to withdraw the accusation when he learned what his brother had done, tried to testify to his wife's innocence. The judges ruled his testimony inadmissible because, as her husband, he had a conflict of interest that made his words unreliable. The legal system had achieved perfect circularity. A wife accused of adultery could not defend herself because her testimony carried no weight. Her husband could not defend her because his testimony was compromised by relationship. No evidence beyond accusation was required, and once accusation was formally filed, no retraction was permitted because allowing withdrawals would undermine the integrity of legal procedures. Now a specialized priest approaches Hanutmir, carrying bronze tongs heated in a brazier until they glow dull red. This is the first punishment assigned to Hertha, breaking of the nose. In a culture where the afterlife required an intact body for the soul's return, deliberate mutilation carried implications extending beyond mortality. What they are about to do will follow her into eternity itself. 3 temple guards hold her head immobile. The priest speaks a ritual formula, asking Amun-Ra to witness that this punishment serves divine justice. Then he clamps the heated tongs onto her nose and tears cartilage from bone with a twisting motion that produces a sound witnesses will later describe as similar to ripping wet papyrus. The pain is not the worst part. The worst part is understanding this is only the beginning. The judges have assigned her 15 days of purification through suffering before her final disposition. 15 days during which her body will be systematically altered to serve as warning to every woman in Thebes who might consider that her desires matter more than her duty. Here is what they never taught you in history class about ancient Egypt. You know about Cleopatra and Nefertiti, powerful queens who wielded influence across the ancient world. You've seen museum exhibits celebrating Egyptian civilization's sophistication, its advances in medicine and mathematics and engineering. You've encountered the romantic notion that ancient Egypt was relatively progressive, that women could own property and initiate divorce. But you've never learned about the systematic brutality reserved for wives accused of adultery. You've never discovered the specialized priests whose sole function was administering punishments so severe that Roman historians, arriving 1,000 years later, would struggle to believe Egyptian records were accurate. You've never heard about the legal framework that made a woman's body property, to be damaged or destroyed at her husband's discretion. After the nose mutilation, Hanutmir is branded on both cheeks with a copper tool shaped like a broken heart hieroglyph, heated until it glows white. The branding serves purposes beyond identification. It makes her crime visible to everyone she encounters. It prevents her from hiding in another city and remarrying under false identity. Most critically, it marks her as available for public degradation, signaling that any citizen may insult or assault her without legal consequence. Egyptian legal philosophy held that shame could purify souls that physical pain alone could not reach. By making the crime permanently visible, authorities ensured that every human interaction for the rest of her life would reinforce her status as violator of Mahat. Then she is taken to a structure that appears in no tourist guides because it was deliberately excluded from temple complex maps when they were compiled for modern visitors. It exists 3 levels below the main temple courts, accessible only through a tunnel descending at a sharp angle into bedrock. The Egyptians called it the House of Correction. Modern archaeologists who have explored it refer to it simply as the adultery chambers. The architecture reveals function with brutal efficiency. 15 small rooms branch off a central corridor, each approximately 10 feet square, carved directly from stone with a single oil lamp niche and iron rings set into walls at heights corresponding to a standing woman's wrists and ankles. The ceiling in each room is exactly 6 feet height, too low for most people to stand fully upright, creating constant physical discomfort even when not being actively punished. There are no windows, no ventilation beyond what circulates through the corridor. The temperature remains constant year-round, cool enough to make bare skin uncomfortable, but not cold enough to provide relief from the burning sensation of brands and wounds. The suffering punishments administered here followed protocols specified in legal texts that survived because they were copied and recopied for judicial training purposes across centuries. The standard purification for adultery took 15 days, divided into 3 5-day periods, each with escalating severity. Days 1 through 5 focused on hunger purification. Hanutmir receives water but no food, measured carefully by priests trained in keeping bodies alive through suffering. The hunger served theological purposes. Egyptian medical texts explained that organs of digestion were linked to organs of reproduction through channels carrying humors throughout the body. Starving the digestive system was believed to purify the reproductive system, burning away spiritual pollution that adultery had introduced. But there was a practical dimension to after 5 days without food. Blood sugar crashes create confusion and weakness. The body begins consuming its own muscle tissue. Cognitive function deteriorates. Resistance to pain and capacity for rebellion diminish significantly. A starved woman becomes easier to control, more willing to simply endure whatever comes next in hopes it might end. Days 6 through 10 introduce pain purification. For women like Hanut's midwives of middle-status men caught with partners of similar rank, the standard protocol involves systematic striking of the back and legs with reeds. This sounds almost mild until you understand the technique. The reed strikes are administered 3 times daily, 20 strikes per session, delivered by a specialized priest trained in hitting hard enough to cause severe pain and tissue damage, but not hard enough to break bones or cause death from internal bleeding. The same spots are struck repeatedly day after day, preventing healing and creating layers of damaged tissue that will never fully recover. Medical papyri from Thebes contain instructions for treating women who survived reed purification, noting they typically developed chronic pain conditions lasting years that often prevented normal walking. The instructions specify that physicians should treat infections that might cause death, but should not provide treatments that would fully heal the damaged tissue. The scars are meant to be permanent, physical reminders that will hurt every time the woman moves for the rest of her life. Days 11 through 15 involve exposure, purification. Hanutmir is displayed publicly in the temple courtyard during the hottest part of each day. Bound to a wooden frame positioned where the sun strikes directly, her mutilated face and branded cheeks fully visible to anyone entering the temple complex. Guards prevent her from moving into shade. Priests offer water irregularly, sometimes every hour, sometimes not for 6 hours, creating unpredictability that prevents psychological preparation for relief. The goal is not just physical suffering from heat and thirst, but psychological breakdown from uncertainty and public humiliation. Temple records indicate that exposure purification was often the phase where women broke completely, accepting whatever final punishment was assigned, because continued existence had become unbearable. Some women used these 5 days to try convincing passing priests or officials of their innocence, begging for mercy or review of their cases. Egyptian law does not permit such appeals. Occasionally, a priest stops to explain to the pleading woman that her suffering serves cosmic justice, that Mahat requires her purification, that her pain is necessary for universal order. These explanations are not cruelty for its own sake, but reflect genuine Egyptian theological belief. The priests who administer these punishments genuinely believe they are serving divine justice. This makes their actions more disturbing, not less. Cruelty justified by theology is cruelty that can be perpetuated indefinitely without guilt, rationalized as righteous service rather than recognized as the systematic torture it actually is. After 15 days, Hanutmir is assigned her final punishment, lifelong temple servitude. Women given this disposition are transferred to temple complexes, where they serve as the lowest category of worker. They clean floors, remove waste, prepare bodies for mummification, perform every task Egyptian sensibilities consider polluting. They live in windowless cells attached to temple storage areas. They are forbidden to speak except when directly addressed by priests. They are never permitted to leave temple grounds or have contact with family. Their heads are kept permanently shaved, their bodies marked with the adultery brand refreshed annually to prevent fading. Most critically, they are forbidden from participating in religious rituals that prepare Egyptians for the afterlife. They cannot commission funerary texts. They cannot purchase canopic jars or reserve tomb space. When they die, their bodies are not mummified, but simply wrapped in plain linen and buried in unmarked graves in the desert beyond temple lands. Egyptian theology holds that without proper burial preparation, the soul cannot successfully navigate the afterlife journey and will instead wander eternally in the void beyond Mahat. This is not just life sentence, but eternal sentence. Hanutmir serves 9 years in temple servitude. Her children grow up believing she died when they were young. Their father remarries 3 years after her conviction. Choosing a much younger wife selected by his brother Amenhotep, the man who orchestrated the entire false accusation. The children are raised by their stepmother and forbidden to mention their birth mother's name. Within a decade, the younger ones have forgotten what Hanutmir looked like. The oldest retains fragmentary memories of a woman who sang while grinding grain, but those memories fade over time until they seem like dreams rather than actual experiences. Hanutmir dies in her 31st year. Her body is discovered in the temple's waste removal area where she collapsed while carrying human waste for disposal. The cause of death is listed in temple records as failure of the heart, how Egyptian physicians described any death they could not specifically diagnose. She is wrapped in plain linen and buried in an unmarked grave in the desert beyond temple walls. No ritual is performed. No funerary text is commissioned. No prayer is said for her soul's journey into the afterlife. Her name does not appear in family genealogies. Her existence is erased from the historical record so completely that we know about her only because a protest text written by her husband Jehuti after her conviction was preserved in an archive of disputed legal cases. Jehuti's text argues that the legal system needs reforms to prevent false accusations from destroying innocent women. His arguments are reviewed by temple authorities and rejected. The decision document explains that preventing false convictions is less important than ensuring actual adulteresses do not escape punishment, and that legal procedures must prioritize certainty of punishment over accuracy of conviction. This reasoning appears repeatedly in Egyptian legal philosophy. The system is designed to catch all possible guilty parties, even if that means punishing significant numbers of innocent women. Egyptian legal theory holds that divine justice will correct any mortal mistakes in the afterlife, where the truly innocent will be vindicated and the truly guilty condemned. But Hanutmir's story reveals what this actually means: women, destroyed by legal systems protecting their own. Procedural integrity over individual justice, cruelty transformed into righteousness through theological justification, and systematic violence given institutional legitimacy. The ruins of Egyptian temples still stand, visited by millions of tourists who walk the same ground where women were systematically tortured. The House of Correction exists beneath Karnak Temple, closed to tourists but physically present, its walls still marked by iron rings that held victims immobile. These places remember even if modern visitors do not know what happened there. And beneath the sand, in unmarked graves scattered across the desert, lie the bodies of thousands of women whose names we will never know, whose crimes were often fabricated, whose suffering was rationalized as cosmic necessity. Hannah Teemer was 22 years old when she entered that limestone judgment square. She was a mother who sang to her children at night, a skilled textile worker whose cloth was sought after by merchants, a woman with friends and dreams, and a future she believed she would have. All of that was taken from her through a legal process that treated her existence as disposable. She spent 9 years in a windowless cell watching other women arrive and suffer and die, knowing she was witnessing her own future. When she collapsed and died on a stone floor in a service corridor, no one recorded her final moments. Did she think of her children? Did she pray to gods who had abandoned her? We will never know. Egyptian record-keeping did not consider the final thoughts of condemned women worth documenting. The limestone where she stood that dawn morning has been worn smooth by 3,000 years of wind and sand. The judge's reed canopy has long since rotted away. The bronze tongs and copper brands have corroded into dust. But the logic that destroyed Hanud-Mirtha, belief that women's bodies are property, that female autonomy threatens cosmic order, that systems of law matter more than individual lives, that logic did not disappear 3,000 years ago. It evolved, spread, and persists in forms we must recognize to combat. In the silence of those underground chambers, in the unmarked graves scattered across the desert, in the gaps where women's names should appear in family records but don't, the truth waits. And the truth is this: civilizations we celebrate as advanced could systematically torture women for exercising autonomy over their own bodies, could transform cruelty into procedure and procedure into righteousness, could destroy thousands of lives while genuinely believing they served divine justice. Hanut-Mir deserved better. They all deserved better. And remembering them, saying their names when we can, acknowledging their existence when we cannot, is the minimum respect we owe to people who were deliberately erased. The desert remembers what the history books forgot.